The conference room was a shrine to wealth. Thick mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling glass windows reflecting the skyline of Manhattan, and a silence that dripped with the tension of impending power. James Wexler, a self-made millionaire known for transforming bankrupt startups into tech empires, sat poised at the head of the table. His pen, an absurdly expensive Mont Blanc, hovered just inches above the dotted line of a billion-dollar acquisition contract. Across from him sat two attorneys and a CEO who'd spent the last year clawing their way to this moment. They all watched James like hawks, as if his signature alone could trigger a financial earthquake. "Mr. Wexler," the lead attorney said, clearing his throat. "Everything is in order. Just your signature now." James adjusted the cuff of his tailored navy suit and gave a tight-lipped smile. His fingers curled around the pen. And then the door slammed open. All heads turned. A gust of air swept through the room as a young woman, no more than 21, stormed in. She wore a faded jean jacket, sneakers, and a backpack that had clearly seen better days. Her hair was tied up in a loose ponytail, and her cheeks were flushed as if she'd run straight from the street to the 34th floor without stopping. "James Wexler," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Don't sign that contract." Security hadn't even had time to react. The room froze. Wexler blinked, his pen frozen mid-air. The attorney stood up, alarmed. "Excuse me, miss, this is a private meeting. You can't." "I'm his daughter," the girl interrupted, her eyes never leaving James. "And he doesn't even know I exist." The room imploded with silence. You could almost hear the skyscrapers outside holding their breath. James narrowed his eyes, scanning her face. He didn't speak. Didn't move. The CEO let out an incredulous laugh. "Is this a stunt? A PR trick? Because if it is..." "It's not," she said firmly. Her voice cracked slightly. "I've spent years trying to find him. My mom, her name was Lila Marin. She met him 22 years ago. She never told him. She thought she was protecting me. But now she's gone. And I need to know if he's really, you." James felt the room closing in. The name hit him like a gut punch. Lila. God, he hadn't heard that name in over 2 decades. They'd had a brief, messy relationship when he was just a cocky junior partner barely scraping rent in Brooklyn. She'd disappeared one morning, and he'd buried the memory with every million he made. "Security," one of the lawyers hissed into his phone, but James raised a hand. "Wait," he said. His voice, normally sharp and commanding, was quiet. "Fragile. What's your name?" "Emma," she said. "Emma Marin." James stood up slowly. For the first time in a long time, his signature didn't matter. The silence in the room thickened, the weight of a billion-dollar deal suddenly paling in comparison to the raw human story unraveling at its center. James Wexler walked slowly around the table, his movements no longer precise and calculated, but hesitant, as though each step brought him closer to an invisible edge he wasn't sure he could cross. Emma didn't flinch. She stood her ground, chin high, even though her hands were clenched so tightly around the straps of her backpack that her knuckles had gone white. Her eyes, a sharp shade of green, followed him with a mixture of hope and defiance. She didn't come for money. She didn't even seem to care about the contract. She came for the truth. He stopped a few feet from her. Close enough now to study the features that did, in fact, echo his own. The same angular jawline. The same dimple on the left side of the chin when she nervously bit her lip. And most painfully, the same eyes as Lila. "Lila never told me," James said, his voice low, stunned. "I didn't know. I swear to God, Emma, I didn't know." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away before they could fall. "I believe you," she said softly. "But that doesn't mean I don't deserve answers." From the corner of the room, the attorneys exchanged nervous glances. The CEO leaned back in his chair, exhaling in disbelief. "James, do you want to postpone this?" James looked back at the table, then at the contract, then at the city stretching out behind the glass. It all felt strangely hollow now. Like he'd built an empire of sand, and only just now realized how easily it could wash away. He turned back to Emma. "Why now?" he asked. She shrugged, then looked down at the floor. I spent most of my life angry at a man I thought abandoned me. But when Mom died, I found her letters. All the ones she wrote to you but never sent. She said you were driven, brilliant, selfish, but never cruel. I just needed to know if she was right. James rubbed his jaw, trying to grasp the moment. The room, the men in suits, the billion-dollar deal, all of it faded. All he could see was this young woman standing before him, carrying the weight of a secret that had never been hers to bear. He nodded slowly. You're not wrong to come. And you're not going anywhere. He turned to his assistant, who stood frozen at the door. Get my car. Tell them the meeting's over. We'll revisit the deal later. But James, the CEO, protested. No, his voice was firm now. This can wait. She can't. Emma didn't smile, but something in her shoulders softened. For the first time in years, she felt like maybe she wasn't drifting alone in the world. As James walked her out, side by side, Emma hesitated. Are you angry? He paused, then shook his head. No. I'm just afraid of what I missed. And wondering how I start making it right. They exited the room together, leaving behind millions in negotiations and entering something far less predictable and far more real. The elevator doors closed with a soft chime behind them, sealing James and Emma in a mirrored box of awkward quiet. The tension between them wasn't hostile, it was something more delicate. A fragile connection being carefully tested in real time, word by word, breath by breath. Emma stood to one side, her arms crossed loosely as she stared at her reflection. You look exactly like you do in the press, she said finally. But less sharp. More human. James gave a dry chuckle, rubbing the back of his neck. Most people don't get past the tailored suit and shareholder quotes. Guess I skipped the line. He glanced at her sideways, trying to keep up with the strange tempo of the moment. It was surreal. Only 20 minutes ago, he'd been preparing to consolidate two tech empires into one. Now he was standing next to a young woman who might be his daughter, riding down to a world he hadn't made time for in over 20 years. When they stepped into the lobby, the cool marble floors gleamed underfoot, and a dozen staff members looked up as James Wexler walked past without a single bodyguard, flanked not by lawyers but by a girl in sneakers with a fraying backpack. His car, a sleek black Bentley, was already waiting at the curb. As the driver opened the door, James gestured for Emma to enter first. She hesitated. Are we going somewhere? Yes, he said. I figured we'd start with lunch. Somewhere quiet. No press. No cameras. Just talking. Emma raised an eyebrow, amused but wary. You sure you don't want to check with your PR team first? I'm more worried about saying the wrong thing to you than to the press, James replied. That earned him a small smile, reluctant but genuine. She slid into the car, and he followed. The doors shut with a soft thud, separating them from the noise of the city. For a few minutes, neither of them said anything. The city rolled by through tinted windows, Madison Avenue, a blur of pedestrians and endless glass storefronts. James sat with his hands folded, staring at the back of the driver's head. He finally spoke. Lila and I were complicated. She was brilliant. Funny. She used to tease me for how obsessed I was with success. Said I was trying to outrun my own shadow. Emma looked down at her hands, playing with the frayed strap of her bag. She never talked much about you. Said you were someone she cared about, but she didn't want her life, or mine, defined by you. James nodded slowly. I guess she succeeded. But that doesn't mean I didn't have a right to know. She thought you'd try to take over. Control things. She didn't want you making me into a reflection of you. James looked at her then, really looked. And are you anything like me? Emma gave a half laugh. I work at a bookstore in Queens. I'm about 4 degrees left of corporate. But I like building things. I write. I fix old laptops in my free time. I guess I've always been curious about the world in a way that makes people a little uncomfortable. That sounds very familiar, James admitted. The car turned off the main road and into a quieter side street. A discreet, ivy-covered restaurant waited behind a minimalist iron gate. No flashing signs. No paparazzi. Just the kind of place people like James Wexler went to disappear for a while. As the valet opened the door, Emma stepped out, this time with a little more confidence. Inside, they were seated in a corner booth, surrounded by soft music and warm wood-paneled walls. A waiter brought menus, but neither of them looked. Their eyes stayed locked, like they were trying to rebuild 20 lost years from scratch, one sentence at a time. James leaned in. If we're doing this, you get to ask anything. No lawyers. No filters. Emma studied him carefully. All right, she said. Then let's start with this. Who were you before the money? James leaned back, exhaling slowly. A scared kid with too much ambition and not enough patience. She tilted her head. Sounds familiar. And just like that, something cracked open between them, not wide, not all the way, but enough. Enough for possibility to creep in. The waiter reappeared to take their orders, but James simply waved a hand. Give us a minute, he said, never breaking eye contact with Emma. She didn't reach for her menu either. The question she'd asked still lingered in the air like an ember refusing to cool. Who were you before the money? James shifted in his seat, his hand resting near the edge of the polished wood table, fingers drumming a slow rhythm. I was born in Jersey, he said finally. Dad was a mechanic. Mom ran the house like it was a war camp, clean floors, perfect manners, church every Sunday. Money was always tight, and everything came with a condition. Love, affection, time, it was all transactional. If I brought home straight A's, I got a little more attention. If I didn't, I might as well have been invisible. Emma's expression softened. So you learned to earn your place. Exactly. He paused. And I got damn good at it. The corner of her mouth lifted. Yeah. I'd say you've made a bit of a name for yourself. James chuckled, but it was a quiet, tired sound. Funny thing about success, once you start winning, it never feels like enough. I used to tell myself I was building something so that no one could ever make me feel powerless again. But somewhere along the way, I just became obsessed with control. Emma leaned back in the booth, folding her arms. That's what my mom was afraid of. James nodded. And she wasn't wrong. I would have tried to shape everything. Where you went to school, what you read, who you became. I wasn't ready to be a father back then. Hell, I barely had room to be a human being. Emma hesitated before asking, are you ready now? He looked at her like she'd just handed him a mirror. I don't know. But I want to try. They sat with that truth for a moment, both of them unsure how far it could carry them, but unwilling to let it go. The waiter returned, awkward but professional. Emma glanced at James, then opened her menu. Well, she said, if you're buying, I'm getting the truffle risotto. James cracked a genuine smile. Order 2. It'll give us something to agree on. As the waiter disappeared again, Emma reached into her backpack. I brought something, she said, pulling out a small envelope. She slid it across the table. I found it among my mom's things. It's a photo. The only one I could find with both of you in it. James carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a Polaroid, slightly faded, creased along the corner. In it, a much younger James stood beside Lila on a Brooklyn rooftop, a beer in his hand, arm around her shoulders. They were laughing. Not posing. Just caught mid-moment, totally unguarded. And there it was again, those same eyes, looking up at him from across the table now, asking the same unspoken question. What comes next? He looked at the photo for a long time, then set it down gently between them. Thank you for not letting that stay buried. Emma tapped the table softly. There's more, you know. Letters. Notes she never sent. I haven't read all of them yet. I was waiting. I don't know, maybe to see if this was real first. James considered this. Maybe we can read them together. If you'll let me. She gave a slow nod. Okay. But you should know I'm not here to become some accessory in your life. I don't want your money. I'm not looking for headlines. I just wanted to know where I came from. And now that you know, he asked. I want to know who you are. Who I am, because of you. And I want to see if there's something here, worth building. The food arrived, steam rising from perfect plates, but neither of them touched it right away. They just sat, father and daughter, both newly aware of the second chances time rarely gives, and the difficult, messy beauty of deciding to take them anyway. They ate slowly, the way people do when they're not really hungry for food but for something else entirely. Each bite was a pause in conversation, each sip of wine or water a chance to let a truth settle before speaking another one. Outside the restaurant's tall windows, the world kept moving, cabs honked, pedestrians bustled, the city pulsed with the usual indifference, but inside, something rare and still was unfolding. Emma set down her fork halfway through the risotto. "So, tell me something about you that isn't on the internet," she said, lifting her gaze. "Something only a few people would know." James arched an eyebrow. "That's a dangerous request." "I'm not afraid of skeletons," she said with a small smile. "I've already found one." Surprise daughter kind of sets the bar high. He chuckled. "Fair. Okay, He leaned back, swirling the wine in his glass. "I play piano. Badly. I took lessons as a kid, but I never kept up with it. Once a year, I get drunk around Christmas and try to play Moon River from memory. I butcher it every time." Emma blinked. That hadn't been the kind of answer she expected. "Do you still have a piano?" "Grand piano. Living room. Looks amazing. Sounds terrible when I touch it." She laughed. "Maybe I'll make you play for me someday." "Not without a drink in my hand." Their laughter eased into a silence that wasn't tense this time, just full. A silence that carried the beginnings of comfort. Emma pulled out her phone, scrolled for a second, and then showed him the screen. "This is my mom and me. I took it last year, on her birthday." She was already sick then. James took the phone gently, studying the image. Lila sat on a worn couch, a wool blanket around her shoulders, Emma beside her, both of them grinning through the kind of love that doesn't require explanation. His chest tightened. "She loved you fiercely," he said, almost to himself. "She did," Emma nodded. "But she also loved independently. She didn't need anyone to complete her. That's probably why she didn't reach out to you." James handed the phone back. "I wish she had. I wish I could have at least said goodbye." "She wrote about you in the end," Emma said. Not with bitterness, but curiosity. Like she wondered who you became. Whether you'd remember her. Whether you'd regret not knowing me. "I regret it more than I can say," James admitted. "And I know saying that doesn't fix anything." Emma looked at him with eyes that had inherited her mother's clarity. "It doesn't. But it helps." James sat forward, resting his elbows on the table. "I can't make up for what I missed. Birthdays. School plays. Late-night panics over homework. I wasn't there when you needed a dad." Emma's voice was quiet. "But you're here now." He nodded. "I am. And I don't want this to be one lunch and a goodbye. I'd like to be part of your life, however you'll let me." She studied him carefully. "Then don't just show up. Be present. Don't send me gifts or call your assistant to schedule time with me. Just show up. As a person. Not a brand." "Deal," James said. A long moment passed. Then, carefully, Emma reached across the table and turned the photo of her mother and James toward him again. "She'd be amused, you know. Seeing you like this. Off balance. Scrambling to figure out how to connect. She always said I'd die of pride," he murmured. "Maybe you're just shedding it," she said. He smiled, then leaned back. "You really are her daughter." Emma glanced at the time. "I should go soon. I have a shift tonight at the store." James looked startled. "Do you want me to drive you?" "No," she said, standing and slipping on her jacket. "But you can walk with me to the subway." He paid the bill, ignoring the waiter's subtle stares, and followed her out into the late afternoon sun. They walked side by side down the quiet street, past cafes and brownstones, neither rushing nor dawdling. When they reached the station entrance, Emma paused. "I don't know what this is going to look like. It's not some neat story." "I don't want neat," James said. "I want real." Emma nodded, then hesitated before pulling a scrap of paper from her pocket. "Here's my number. But text, don't call. I screen unknown numbers like a paranoid cat." He laughed. "Fair enough." She turned to head down the steps, then stopped and looked back. "You might have missed the beginning. But you're not too late for the rest." And with that, she disappeared into the crowd, leaving James Wexler, billionaire, empire builder, accidental father, standing on a cracked sidewalk in Midtown, holding a crumpled slip of paper like it was the most valuable contract he'd ever received. Weeks passed, and the headlines moved on. The billion-dollar merger James Wexler had walked out on was eventually signed by someone else. His advisors called it a colossal mistake. The media speculated everything from a quiet mental breakdown to secret legal troubles. But James ignored it all. For the first time in 2 decades, he stopped caring about controlling the narrative. He cared about Emma. They met every Sunday at a quiet bookstore cafe in Queens where Emma worked part-time. James showed up in jeans, sometimes wearing a baseball cap to hide from recognition, though no one really looked twice. He brought books he never read in his youth, Vonnegut, Zadie Smith, Baldwin, and asked Emma to recommend her favorites. She surprised him weekly. They didn't talk about money, or business, or fame. They talked about movies, awkward dates, memories of Lila, music, how she taught herself to rebuild phones with YouTube tutorials. James confessed that he still didn't know how to do his own laundry. Emma rolled her eyes and gave him a list of basic survival skills for emotionally unavailable rich people. He laughed harder than he had in years. One rainy afternoon, she brought a stack of Lila's unsent letters in a showbox. "I haven't read these yet," she said, brushing a thumb along the lid. "I thought maybe we could, together." They sat by the window while the rain whispered against the glass, and read them aloud. Lila's handwriting was neat and sharp, her words filled with warmth, frustration, wonder, and quiet pain. One letter, dated just a month before Emma's birth, said, "If I ever tell him, it'll be because I believe he can be more than his ambition. That there's a heart under all that fire. I used to see it when he smiled after midnight." James didn't say anything. He just wiped his eyes and kept reading. Later, as the rain cleared, Emma nudged him gently. "You know, you've got a piano that's collecting dust." James looked at her, then at the street beyond the window. "Come by next Sunday," he said. "Bring sheet music. We'll butcher Moon River together." Emma grinned. "Only if I get to play melody. Deal." They didn't call it healing, or forgiveness, or a second chance. But in the soft, uncertain space between their visits, something better was growing. A relationship. Slowly. Imperfectly. Earned.